There we go, we're on. We're on.
I'll put the teacup down.
You can put the teacup down. So, hello, my name is Karen Dodd from Wise Women Weekdays, and today I'm sitting on the sofa with Sandi Adams. Hello, Sandi.
Hi, Karen.
We've spent the weekend together, haven't we?
We have. We've had a really good girly weekend.
We have. Girly, we've
putting the world to rights.
Yeah, and we've got Jane over here who says she's going to be quiet, but she might pop in and ask a question or two, but maybe not. But so we've just been chatting generally about life, haven't we, and what's going on, because we're living in a bit of a topsy-turvy world.
We are.
And then I was showing you something on, somebody has sent me of a video in Portugal, and they were likening it to Pakistan because of the amount of immigrants that are being shipped over to all countries in the West, it appears. And I just wanted to really know what your take on that was, to be honest.
Well, I must admit, I was concerned when I heard that I think it was 6,000 people landed in Lampedusa, which is a tiny Italian island in the Mediterranean. And how can a tiny island sustain 6,000 boat people arriving? And I've been looking at this for a number of years, really, and a long time ago I did quite a bit of research into the Kalgeri plan, which not many people have heard about, and I think it's something that, because of all this stuff, I mean, I know that Ireland, when I went over to Ireland earlier on in the summer, they were having real problems with the amount of immigrants pouring into Ireland. Now, why is this happening? And yes, we've obviously got to have compassion for immigrants that are truly immigrants and fleeing war-torn places. But these people they're usually fighting age young men, and there's a lack of families. There are some families, but the majority of them are fighting age men. And a lot of people sort of will counteract this and say, oh, that's not true. But what we're seeing is manifesting. What we're seeing is that the plan is manifesting. Now, the Kalgeri plan was really the brainchild of a man called Coudenhove von Kalgeri. No, it's Richard von Coudenhove von Kalgeri, or was it the other way around? I can't remember.
It's quite a mouthful, but
you
can find it.
There's a von in there somewhere.
There's a von in there, and I think you can find it on Wikipedia.
You can go onto Wikipedia. Yeah. You can. There's been many references to it, and it came about in 1925 when he published a book called Praktischer Idealismus, which means practical idealism. And it really was a plan. Now, he's a very odd character because he was mixed race. His father was a Jewish Austrian Jewish count, and his mother was Japanese. And he had this rather strange upbringing between these two people. And he just decided that the best way to go with all of this would be for Europe to be completely mixed race. And his idea was to destabilize, and he was really in with all the bankers at the time, the Rothschilds, and because he'd grown up in this very, very sort of, I suppose it was a privileged background, his count, and a Jewish count at that. So they mixed with all the bankers, the Warburgs and the Rothschilds.
Sorry, when was this? What day?
He was born in the early 1900s, so we're talking 1925.
25, okay, about 100 years
ago.
So
yeah, and so he sort of was in that whole ideology of let's destabilize other countries, adventure abroad again, destabilize other countries, and with that destabilization we bring the immigrants in, and they integrate with the whole of Europe, because if we can win Europe, then we can rule the world, basically. So this was the plan. And so they had this idea that bringing all these people from sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, Middle East, destabilizing those countries, and then bringing these poor destabilized people into Europe, and then they integrate with the Europeans, and in doing so the Europeans lose their national sovereignty, their national everything about them that makes them whatever country they're cultural, and they lose their state of I suppose sovereignty, their sovereignty and their nationhood. So all of that put together you'd think, well, that's a conspiracy theory, wouldn't you?
Well, you would.
But you look at seeing what's manifesting, but also what's really interesting is the first person to receive something called the Charlemagne Prize, which was put together by the EU in the 1950s for progressing this plan, was Richard von Coudenhove-Kalergi. He received the very first Charlemagne Prize, and the Charlemagne Prize is really for people that have progressed this ideology of bringing in these people to dilute.
Yes, the Western
and
ways.
they call it the genocide of Europe.
Wow.
And so so the Coudenhove-Kalergi Prize is quite interesting because it's given every 4 years, I think, and I've got a list of some of the recipients. Now, I did sort of think, oh, this could be a conspiracy theory, but when you realise that all these people since 1950 have received this, I'll just read you a few because it really is telling. Winston Churchill. Now, Walter Hallstein received it. Now, he was the Nazi lawyer of the EU. The very first lawyer of the EU was him, and he was in the Nazi party. Walter Scheel, King Juan Carlos of Spain, Henry Kissinger, Jacques Delors, Gro Harlem Brundtland, who wrote Our Common Future for the Club of Rome and the United Nations, Tony Blair, Bill Clinton, Jean-Claude Juncker, Angela Merkel, Donald Tusk, there's more, Pope Francis, Emmanuel Macron, Antonio Guterres, who's the current Secretary General of the UN, and it's currently being held, the Coudenhove-Kalergi Charlemagne Prize is currently being held by Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ukrainian people. So you realise...
Gallery of Rogues.
Exactly. So it's a rogues gallery, and what it really aims to do is to destabilise the West, because the West has to be destroyed in order for world governance to come in.
So do you think the people that are coming in, because as being in the West and we try to be loving, kind, compassionate, and help those, in my opinion, you would think, where are the women and children? Because it used to be women and children first, but I don't see many women. There are a few on the street with their big issue things going on, but the majority does seem to be the young men. Do the young men know what's going on? These immigrants that are coming in, do you think they have an awareness?
I don't know. I think they're given, they're told this is the land of milk and honey.
Yeah.
This is where you can come out of your terrible war-torn place or whatever, or your poverty. Most of them are economic migrants. So it's getting them out of poverty, and they're being offered hotels, benefits. They're given everything. What is left for the British people and the people of Ireland and the people of Portugal and the people of Germany and anywhere where or Italy, where all of these people are coming into? Where it's being taken out of the mouths of those sovereign states to be given to people from outside because they've deliberately been destabilised. And I don't think these people probably didn't even know that they're being manipulated. No. I mean, who knows what's going on?
And when we talk about destabilising countries, I mean, is that just through wars, or is there other means? Is it war?
A lot of it's economic. Yeah. Economic, destabilisation, where they look and they're being told, you go to England, you can get benefits, you can get a house,
of course.
you can stay in a hotel with all your food paid for. Yeah. Of course, who wouldn't?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're not looking after our own, though, are we? You've got the homeless outside the Premier Inn, and you've got these young men that are inside the Premier Inn.
And we've got war veterans on our streets as well.
Yeah. So it's not really good situation.
It's not good
to be in.
It's not good.
So going back to the reason behind it, when we were saying we're trying to certain powers of be or shouldn't be are diluting the Western way of living. Why?
Why? Because you see, this is what I've been talking about in a lot of my talks, is that the Agenda 2030 is a way of creating global governance. And instead of our governments, it creates global governance. And part of that is about destroying Western civilization. And it's always been so. And interestingly, one of the recipients of the Coudenhove-Kalergi Plan is Gro Harlem Brundtland. Now she was the Prime Minister of Norway in 1987, and she worked very closely with the Club of Rome and the United Nations to write one of the Club of Rome reports, which is Our Common Future, which was all about a second Marshall Plan to destabilise the West by making, she didn't say it was but the outcome was it destabilised the West, because money was given from the West, including America, to India and China to get rid of our manufacturing industry.
Yeah.
And all of it went over to India and China. Well, the majority of it did. And even Germany as well. I mean, our car industry went over to Germany. So we don't manufacture anything anymore. And this was the case with a lot of countries in Europe. Actually, were sort of, the money was given over in this almost like a second Marshall Plan to India and China, because we were seen as the polluting West, the affluent, greedy, polluting West. And look how the tables have turned.
Absolutely.
And that's where we are now. And this is all part of the plan, is to destroy us further with this immigrant influx. Because these people should not be destabilised from their own countries. What should happen is there should be money
going into their countries
to support them, rather than than it going on, bringing them in and destabilising everything else. And I think there's a darker plan here. It's not what it seems. Yeah.
Because also, I think those of us that see these immigrants on the street, and I know there have been a few issues in certain towns, but we think, oh, look at those, and there's whole bunches of them. And it can be a little bit intimidating, but also for these young men, it's probably not where they want to be. Or maybe it is, I don't know. Would they not prefer to be in a nice, hot, sunny climate with their family?
Who knows what they feel when they arrive here.
Yeah, and what they've been told.
And I do know one hotel owner from Cornwall, and he's quite well known, and he's got a very big hotel in Cornwall, in Tintagel, and he was approached by the Home Office to house all these these people, and he turned it down. He has the means to turn it down. And there's how many hotel owners simply don't have the means to turn it down.
Absolutely.
And I know that in places like Torquay in Devon, that there's a lot of trouble now, because crime is coming in, because these people are brought over here, and even though they're given all their sustenance and everything, there's been crime happening.
Of course, because they've had a different education, haven't they, to us, and they don't know our rules and regulations and how maybe to respect the way we live our lives. It's a massive clash. It's a massive
huge
clash.
Cultural differences.
So it's not really a safe place to be for either them or
Yeah.
us. So you mentioned it's like there's a hidden agenda behind this. Can you elaborate?
Well, it's all part of the whole Agenda 2030, which is about global governance and bringing in global governance. And they're doing it. Well, they did it through Agenda 21, and it's now turned into Agenda 2030. The Coudenhove-Kalergi Plan is just another aspect of Agenda 2030. It's like, as we know, central banking digital currency, is all part of, the AI, surveillance, all of these, all brought together as part of the bigger plan of Agenda 2030. And when you look at the origins of Agenda 2030 within the Club of Rome and the Club of Rome reports that made Agenda 2030, you realise that there's a concerted plan for depopulation, for bringing in a different form of economy, a green economy, but it's a kind of greenwashing economy. It's making CO2 the reason to create carbon credits, and to use those in a tokenization economy through social
behaviour kind of thing.
Social behaviour. It's a bit like Chinese social credit system, because they're using something called ESGs, which are environmental and social governance, and all businesses, if they're registered on Companies House, will have to adhere to these really, really stringent policies on environmental and social governance. So again, it's a lot of paperwork for businesses to deal with, but it is also a form of social credit rating. And if you don't conform properly to these social credit ratings, which is the ESGs, you won't be able to work. You won't be able to function as a business owner. And those are quite, if you look into the ESGs, it's about running your company. It's a bit, if you like, it's a bit like, I don't know how to explain it, but you have a set of rules that you have to adhere by, and you have to make sure that your company is taking out ways of being more green.
Yeah, sure.
Are your employees cycling to work?
Yeah.
Are you practicing diversity within your company? What are you doing about do you have solar panels? Do you have are you recycling? But more than that, and it's really pernicious. It makes each company it puts you on your toes because you're being scrutinised the whole time.
Right.
It's a scrutiny thing. So,
because I was chatting to somebody the other day about this and how far-fetched it seems and how far ahead in the future this might be happening. But I know it's happening now.
yeah.
And my friend said, well, in China, they even they're monitoring the amount of toilet paper that can be issued if you haven't got enough credits on your social. And I don't know if you've ever seen the program Black Mirror.
Oh yes, I've seen those.
And you think, oh God, this is really scary.
It's a reality.
It is.
Black Mirror is real.
We're living it.
And China is real. And actually, what's happening? This is global communism.
Yeah.
Call it by any name you like. Communitarianism. It is global communism, and it is going to destroy our entire way of life if we allow it, and we can't allow it.
So just sort of moving over slightly, because everything is linked from what you're saying, and you've been on this path for many years, haven't you? I know you used to before this this pandemic thing, you were going around the country talking about the bigger picture, trying to bring awareness to Agenda 21, because that's how I first heard about you. But so moving on to this green agenda, net zero, or whatever they want to call it, how do you actually feel about that? I mean, is there a massive climate change? Is there something we should be worried about? Are the ice caps melting and the oceans getting bigger? Are we,
I mean, I get annoyed that they call it climate change, because the climate's changing all the time and always has done for millions of years. But when they first brought it in, they called it global warming. And of course, it didn't warm to the degree that they wanted it to push this agenda. And they then called it climate change. My big wake-up call was years ago. I read a book called Behind the Green Mask by Rosa Corre, and it was a real wake-up call to realise, and I could see it anyway because I joined the Green Party, and I could see it being taken over with this big money behind it.
Yeah.
And really, a lot of the funny enough, the Earth Summit was brought about by oil billionaires, because they had already invested in the carbon credit banks. Because they wanted to own every resource on the planet, and what better way of doing it than saying, right, you humans are killing the planet, therefore we need to take charge and manage it properly. So it was a way, the Earth Summit and pushing climate change as the reason for the for the takeover of the world, if you like, that they could guilt ship everyone into giving up all their rights and freedoms in order to save the planet.
Yeah.
And how clever is that?
Very
that's
clever.
What they did. They got 178 people, world leaders, to sign up to Agenda 21 in Rio in 1992 to save the planet, and who wouldn't? Yeah. And of course, that's it. It was a big guilt trip. It was a lie. And yes, there are obviously there's factors that we you're not dismissing the fact that humans, to a degree, have destroyed lots of the planet, but it's usually through globalization and through rampant greed, and capitalism. And all they're doing is they're replacing it with surveillance capitalism, which is a different kind of capitalism, but still capitalism. Call it whatever you like. But it's a corporate capitalism, which is a communism. It's communitarianism. Which is being pushed,
because I mean, pollution. You can see that all around you, can't you? Where people do just disrespect the country in which we live in, and I think that has a part to play. But also in the West, they're saying like the fossil fuels, we should have electric vehicles and the wind farms and the solar panels and everything like that. But then you look at China, And I think what they're doing, they're like opening coal mines, 1 or 2 a week.
And they've got nuclear power stations,
Yeah.
they've got coal-fired power stations. They are not being sanctioned at all. And why is this? This is because they have to, we have to be the polluters, we have to be the ones that are being sanctioned. And this is why, a lot of the politicians walked out of the Paris Climate Accord, because they looked at the emissions that India and China were giving out, and Europe is way down the scale, and yet we're being we're being penalised.
But is it because we've got to lead by example? Do you think it's that, or is there again another hidden agenda?
Well, there's a hidden agenda because, in a way, pushing all this green technology on us is impoverishing us, and also it will unfortunately starve us out, because all of this whole green, there's a document called Absolute Zero which came from the British government. It's you can get it on the web. It's the UK Fires document called Absolute Zero. I think it's page 4 or 5. There's a timeline of what the government want by 2030. And it's no planes flying in or out of the UK, no ships in or out of the UK, no wood burning stoves, no sheep or lamb production, no, the big sanctions on concrete, no gas in the building trade, no gas boilers in houses, no gas cookers in houses, everything electric. Well, imagine what it's like when, for instance, what's happening in North Somerset is that the land between now and 2028, if you press the button on their website, on North Somerset's website for renewables, it's an interactive map, you can press this button and it all lights up with all the renewable energies that are happening in North Somerset. Every bit of land is taken up with solar panels, big fields of photovoltaics, and the wind farms, and building as well. Lots of building going on. There is nowhere for the sheep and the cattle and the crops. And so if this is just a little snapshot of North Somerset, what is happening in the rest of the world? Because farmers are being discouraged from farming.
Absolutely.
They're being told over a 3-year period their subsidies are going to be incrementally reduced if they don't stop farming. They have to diversify and set up businesses on their land. And even, who's that guy, that funny man that used to do the motor, I can't remember his name now. He's now got a farm.
Jeremy
Clarkson. He was talking about, thank you, Jane. He was talking about it the other day on the television. He was saying, I've been told that I shouldn't be farming and that I've got to set up businesses. Well, where do I get the money for these businesses? And that all my subsidies are going to be taken away. And I've been talking to farmers in Somerset about it, and they're all up in arms. DEFRA have come along and said, you've got to stop farming. You've got to stop,
which is our
dairy
food
farming.
Supply.
You've got to stop sheep farming. You've got to stop beef farming, and crop farming. And they're growing crops now that are easy, things like maize, which actually destroys the land.
And I don't know if it's even good for our health.
Exactly, maize is, corn isn't a very nutritious thing anyway.
But it's also interesting because, that's kind of happening in the UK, but it's also very much happening in Holland and in India and in Germany. Yeah. And the farmers, I think, are out in hundreds.
What's interesting in places like Holland is that they went for the jugular. They said, right, you cannot use fertiliser. So all the farmers got together all at once and blockaded. Yes. And to a degree, a lot of them have won their cases to grow. In England, again, it's this incremental thing where they're just taking away their subsidies, and a lot of the farmers haven't woken up yet. Yeah. And a lot of the farmers aren't putting 2 and 2 together, thinking, hang on, we're an island. If they stop the imports and exports by 2030 and we're not growing anything, who's going to feed the people? Yeah, exactly. Nobody's asking that question.
So I guess it is, if for those people that do know what's going on, would you encourage people to grow their own food and have their own chickens?
Yeah. Do whatever you can, and if you can, band together and set your own farms up. Yeah. And what we're trying to do is encourage farmers to sort of wave goodbye to DEFRA and just do what they want to do their own thing. And if it means them losing their subsidies, then they'll have to farmers have got lazy in England.
Well,
They've been given
yeah.
subsidies for not
Yeah.
doing very much. They've got to start working again
Yeah.
and getting people on the land to work
as they used to.
And people are desperate to grow. Farmers, just give the people a field and let the people grow.
Absolutely.
And then we could get up our own economy.
Yeah.
You know.
Because I think I live opposite a farm, and I always wanted to marry a farmer. When I was younger,
I
always
you as a farmer's wife.
I always
Yeah,
wanted to,
yeah.
but then I didn't want to kill the animals and stuff. So, but I like the cute and fluffy aspect of it. But I think seeing the farmers work, they do work. You know, where we are, it's an active farm. They do have sheep. They have cows and stuff. But you can see it's very, very hard work, and therefore if you are a farmer and you're getting into your 50s and 60s and the bones start creaking,
it's hard work.
And the government's saying here's a check. It's quite easy to take the check, isn't it?
And youngsters don't want to inherit the farms anymore. You know, they've gone off to
computer
London
land or
and become bankers.
Bankers or YouTube influencers and stuff like that. So the world is very much changing.
It's changed. Yeah.
So what about this when you've had people out there trying to, like that young girl, what's her name, with the plaits, that came along saying about, you know, how dare you,
Greta
Thunberg.
Thank you. So what about her? I mean, is she been saying the right thing, or?
Of course not. No,
she's a Rothschild.
Well, I don't know whether she is one, but she certainly was being funded by the Rothschilds. I mean, they owned that boat that she supposedly sailed around the world in, and she didn't. She got seasick, and it was a big. She used to catch planes everywhere, and then they'd dump her on the boat so she could sail into a harbour, and everybody go, "Whoa, Greta's here!" And she's made her family, and she had made fortunes out of all of this. But you know, it didn't work. You know, with Greta, she came over here wagging her finger at us, and people disliked her. So that narrative kind of lost a bit of traction. I mean, she was obviously she was promoted, and Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil and Earth First got really behind her. And they are now getting desperate because they're doing lots of terrorist things like throwing oil over pictures in the National Gallery. So they've become quite unpopular. So the narrative of all of that extreme green, and they are extremists, let's face it, it's not being well received. Now, isn't it funny that Greta sort of disappeared off the scene a little bit when she was going full on with this? And this was around 2019, and the United Nations, with Antonio Guterres, who is he's at the moment Secretary General, and he's taken the Coudenhove Clergy Prize, or the Charlemagne
it's like
Prize.
an Oscar, isn't it?
I've got one of those. He got together with Klaus Schwab in 2019, because the climate change thing wasn't quite pushing us in the direction that they wanted us to go in. So they held something called the Strategic Framework Partnership Agreement meeting in Geneva. Now, they decided at that meeting to accelerate Agenda 2030. And Agenda 2030 is really about, you know, no planes, no this, no that, you know, world governance. So they had this meeting, and there's pictures of them with this kind of framework partnership, you know, document, and then literally, and what they'd obviously decided on came to light in 2019, but 4 months after the meeting that they had in Geneva. So in 2019, in November, so June was Geneva, November is New York. They met at the Johns Hopkins Institute in New York, and they held something called Event 201, which was a what-if scenario. What if a novel coronavirus, so escaped from a wet market in Brazil, this was, what would we do? How would we manage it? And it was very interesting. You can still find it online, and it's luckily they have to put, you know, this is a simulation.
Yes, it's on the bottom. Yes,
in case people get really worried. Yeah. But it was what would we do if, and it was 3 days of preparedness.
Yes.
Again, preparedness for what would happen. And this is before, you know, it had all happened. And of course, you know, Bill and Melinda Gates were invited to that meeting, and of course they had the solution. So, and what did we see? You know, we saw an absolute acceleration of all the AI and all the biometrics in the supermarkets. You know, we've now got very few human tills. All of the facial recognition went in whilst we were sleeping.
Yeah.
We were locked up. We were locked up, but the infrastructure was going in. They weren't locked up.
Yeah.
And of course, all the roads were dug up, all the cables have gone in, all the cameras went up, the ULEZ was all sorted out. All of that happened when we were locked up. It was the acceleration of global governance, and that's what we're living with now.
And if we made a movie out of this, you wouldn't believe it, would you?
No.
You know, you'd say that no, that wouldn't happen, but
No.
it's happened, and it's
Yeah.
happening in our lifetime.
In our lifetime, and it's accelerating at breakneck speed unless we manage to do something about it. Which is, for goodness sake, everyone wake up, smell the coffee, see what's happening around you, and get on board with us coming together to do something about it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, this technology can be stopped, and I think our politicians also sleeping in Westminster. They have no idea what's coming. You talk to any of them about what really is. They're supporting Agenda 2030.
Yes, but they don't realise the intention behind it.
We need politicians who've got the balls to stand up and understand what's happening.
Wow.
There we are.
Wow. Anything else you would want to say on this? Because I know that I have many questions.
It sounds very negative, and people accuse me of being negative, but I don't, you know, it's difficult to know what the solutions are. I know the solutions are us coming together and forgetting our egos and actually really coming together and combating this and getting rid of our devices, you know, being able to live without our devices and living a simpler, more ethical, happier life.
Because you're going back into community, aren't you? Which I think a lot of people are striving to do, but there's the devices.
But it's really interesting that the community is being used as a weapon against us with the infiltration of communitarianism, which is, you know, really fluffy thinking and going along with the global agenda. So we've got to be as wise as serpents and as gentle as doves. We do, and I don't know how we actually.
I think a lot of stuff is going on behind the scenes that we don't know about on our side. I think there's a lot of young people that aren't active out there, sort of online doing the thing. I do believe that, and a lot of people say, well, it's a good time to be alive, possibly because there is a massive change. There is, and it's our opportunity to actually change, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it is potentially scary for the young people unless they do become aware of it.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, the devices, they are not great, and there's a lot of messages that are put out in the music and in the movie world, isn't there? Which is also a little bit scary, but it's there. I had a couple more questions. How did you actually get into this? Because you haven't been doing this all your life, have you? You had a corporate job. You had a very good job beforehand.
I did.
Creative.
I did. I went to art school, and I was a bit of a hippie, really. I wanted peace, love, and everything that goes with it. And I went to art school, and then I decided I wanted to do theatre, set design in theatre. And I did. I worked at the Old Vic and the National Theatre. I did a set design degree, and I was a scenic artist and prop maker and worked in theatre, and I loved it. And then, of course, you know, it got to the point where it was the 80s, and I wanted to buy a house and have children, and we got married, and suddenly the bills were there, and this new thing came in, which was they called it industrial theatre. It was actually corporate live events. It was the way to do installations and to sell stuff, and it was this beginning of this whole corporatocracy came in, and I kind of witnessed that on quite a visceral level. And I found myself working, doing these corporate live events, which were paid incredibly well because they had the money. Theatre didn't have the money. So I was lured by the money because, you know, my husband and I at that point, you know, we were working very hard and trying to bring up a family and everything. So I found myself working on a massive installation for Microsoft. And I met Bill Gates, and I could see that all of it was based around, it was based around a mini smart city, if you like. We had to take over a piece of real estate in Chelsea and turn it into this sort of, it was a London square. We had to turn it into a London square. And I was watching and seeing how this was all working. And I did meet Bill Gates, and I wasn't impressed with him. And I thought, this is really, you know, the geekiness of it and the weirdness of it, and everything was interconnected. And I'd already done Microsoft Home, which was equally as spooky, you know.
Wow.
And it was a house that was all wired up. And I thought, and then I went to work for Google and met Eric Schmidt and had some very bizarre conversations with Eric Schmidt in a bar in Ireland. And he was saying that he flew into New York every week to have breakfast with George Bush. And I suddenly realised I was working for the wrong people.
Wow.
And
but what was it that suddenly made you think that? Was there like a eureka moment?
Well, it was a general thing. It was I was working on for Google. I was working on something called it was they had an acronym for it. It was SAVE. It was the Summit Against Violent Extremism.
Gosh.
And I thought, what on earth is all this about? And I realised that it was actually how do domestic terrorists organise themselves on the internet. Yeah. And I realised that was a big aha moment. Wow. And I was at that time I was reading Behind the Green Mask about the Green Agenda. Yeah. And I was reading, funny enough, James Dellingpole's book Watermelons about the Green Agenda. And I just suddenly put two and I was fitting it together like a jigsaw puzzle. Yeah, yeah. And I suddenly thought, no, this isn't for me. I need to get out of this. It took me a long time to extricate myself out. I also worked on the Olympic, not the ceremony, but I was working on the Olympics for the Qatari royal family. And everyone wanted me to go to the Olympic ceremony. I'm glad I didn't go. When I saw it on YouTube, I thought, oh my God. Yeah. That is the most satanic thing I've ever seen. Yeah, so and many messages. That was my exit. That was my exit out.
But it's funny. I think we have these experiences in life that take us to where we are now, and those experiences and job opportunities that have. If you didn't have that, you probably wouldn't be the wealth of knowledge that you are now. Because I think you're one of Britain's assets. Really, you've got so well. Truly, you have so much information and you can retain it. And I have so much respect for you because you've been out there fighting the fight and trying to bring the awareness to people. And I just mentioned when we came over to St James, hello, she's still there listening, beautiful house, and she's been our mummy this weekend.
She's been looking after us, it's been lovely.
Fantastic, so thank you, Jane.
I've never been looked after so well.
But I just mentioned about the Zionists, that's the thing, because what's going on in the world, and the Zionist seems to be the in name or word at the moment, and we've got to be careful.
You have to be very careful.
But when I said about Greta, and I was talking to somebody else, well, Greta, I would liken her to a Nazi. I've said it now, and maybe the Nazis are still running the world. And then you actually said, well, they are, didn't they?
Well, do you know, it never went away really, because of Operation Paperclip.
Yeah, it's like the Zionists, and that's how the Zionists, are they the same sort of thing?
They're all the same.
All
it's
the
like
same.
The Bolshevik Revolution was Nazi. It was also it was in a way, there's no difference between Nazism and communism.
No.
And go back to Cromwell.
And
Cromwell was pushing the same thing.
Yeah.
And yet we think he was a religious man. He wasn't. He was keeping horses in the church on purpose.
So I'm going to have to come to you and we have to do a little chat because they can't see your face. It's a beautiful face.
She's got a lot of knowledge though.
She has. Likewise, I'm sitting here listening to you to throw all these names out on these books, and it's amazing. So I have huge respect for you. And thank God for you, really, because you're bringing the knowledge to myself and other people that want the knowledge and they don't get it because they've been conned, really. When we think of sweet little Greta and other people, trying to save the planet, but there is this hidden agenda that a lot of us don't know about, and we really do need to wake up.
And Operation Paperclip was the operation that happened post-war. All the minor, if you like, the minor Nazis were sent to Nuremberg, but the tip-top ones were actually sent all over the all over the world, to America and to Germany, to all other places, to and Brazil, to really to a lot of them were top scientists and top doctors, and they all went to really get onto the Human Genome Project and the space race, and that's exactly where all the brains went. So the ones that weren't so bright were sent to Nuremberg and were scapegoats, because they're very good at scapegoating that lot.
Of course.
And so
the other thing what I wanted to say, when you mentioned communitarianism, this is very different to, it is different to communism, isn't it?
Yes.
So the idea of communitarianism is having everybody agreeing to the same thing, and if one independent person said,
except it's shored up by by corporations
Yeah.
and corporate money. So
Yeah.
therefore, it's not a if you imagine communism, well, it's always the same with communism. You've got the proletariat, and then you've got the the elites on the top who organise everything. So it's no different to that. But what it does, it's kind of it was introduced in 1968 by a chap called Amitai Etzioni, and he was an Israeli political scientist and psychologist from Columbia University, and he was a great friend of Klaus Schwab's, and it's almost so communitarianism has been invented for now, as they plan ahead. And communitarianism is the ideology is that your rights is a carefully balanced, crafted sort of balance between your rights, your individual rights, and the rights of the community. And your individual rights are actually not as important as the community's rights. Therefore, your rights and freedoms become, more, everything has to be a hive mind and a collective. And that's what we have to really be aware of within our own communities, because the minute communitarianism steeps in, it really does, it splits, it divides the communities. Because there's a lot of people that want sovereignty and individual rights, and the communitarians will say that's selfish. You've got to be a hive mind, it's got to be the collective. We've got to be all one. Unity. The unity is a big word in communitarianism, and you've got to be so careful that you don't fall into the trap, because Maurice Strong, who ran the whole Agenda 21, the Earth Summit, he was a classic communitarian, because he said communism is my ideology, but capitalism is my methodology. Now, he was an oil billionaire, an absolute billionaire, right? Okay, so an oil billionaire heads up the Earth Summit saying we mustn't fly anywhere. Interesting. And we mustn't have cars. But he was a classic. It's that ideology where you've got an ideology of let's all be one, but somebody has to own everything, and you will own nothing, and you'll be happy. So they will own everything,
and we'll be happy,
but we're not going to be happy.
We are not, and they're not going to own it.
And they're not going to own everything.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well. Thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you, because I just asked you today, didn't I? We were
Just
having
off the cuff.
weekend. Would you mind just having a little chat? Because you've got so
I never
much
know what I
knowledge.
say, only when I listen back.
And okay, well, I'll send this
Probably
to
a load
you.
of rubbish.
No, it's not at all. It's really. Is it Jane, a load of rubbish?
No.
It's been fantastic.
Depressing, but no.
Well,
sorry, you
no,
see,
not depressing.
I
because
try not to be
No,
depressing.
it's not depressing. You're
Good.
telling the truth. You're
Thank
telling the
you.
truth.
Well, we've got to know about it.
We've got to know about that, and we have to
Yeah.
do something about it, and,
Yeah.
and come together, but not under communitarianism as sovereign
Yeah.
beings. And I think that is happening. So I was just going to say, to close, I do really think you need to set up your own
I know.
chat thing.
I know, and I
podcast.
will. And if you can
Good.
show me how to do it.
Yeah, so
I'm
we're going to have the Sandi
inveterate.
Adams show, because she has got so much knowledge, and we want Sandi supported online in her
Thank you.
show.
Thank you.
And if you guys watching this have enjoyed listening to Wise Women Weekdays, please give it a thumbs up, like it, subscribe, and comment. And if you have any comments, we do read them. And if you've got any questions for Sandi, we will get those answers to you. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank
Sandi.
you, Karen, for
And
having
thank
me
you.
on.
You're very, very welcome.
And for Jane,
And thank
off
for Jane,
camera.
our mummy. Yeah.
Noise is off.
Yeah.
Our mummy.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.